Matt, there's an instinct to jump into the politics and the calculus, and we'll get to all of that. But before we do, let's just zoom out. I mean, how is history going to remember the way that Republicans are acting in this moment, right? There is both the judgment about what led to January 6th, there is what happened on January 6th, and now there is the long tail of denialism that this party is still a part of.
Well, I think that's a great perspective to look at it with, because I think history is going to judge the Republican Party in this moment, the president in this moment, and all the Republican leadership exceedingly badly at this time. If you can imagine if on what happened on December 7th at Pearl Harbor, we had the same reaction by one political party to this, what the country would think and what we would write in our history books. The problem we have, which we're going to constantly going to, is who's writing the history books? Because at this moment in time, it seems objective to me that the judgment on this and the Republicans in this insurrection is bad. But as we've seen, there's been an attempt in some school districts and in some states to excise actual history, including racism and everything else. So who writes the history book's important, but objectively, it's bad.
But Matt, stay with me, because, you know, the big news today was that Adam Kinzinger is going to be added to this commission. And of course, part of that has to do with Pelosi wanting bipartisan credibility, understanding that if we're really going to get to the bottom of what happened, if there really is going to be accountability, then people need to believe that it was a fair process, putting aside all of the ways in which Republicans made that nearly impossible. Can Kinzinger do that? Can anyone do that, right? Is there anyone you can add to this commission who is going to make Republicans writ large believe their ultimate findings?
The short answer is no. A third of the country, no matter who she put on it, no matter what she did about it, was not going to believe whatever the truth was in this matter. And to me, the goal is not bipartisanship, or the goal is not some balanced committee. The goal is truth. And I think Nancy Pelosi has done very well at keeping that as the North Star. The North Star is truth in this. And you're not going to be able to affect the sort of Trump fan club group of people out there, no matter what facts are presented to it, because their connection to Donald Trump is not rational based, it's emotional based. Nothing she could do is going to affect a third of the country.
Yeah, Eugene, I'm going to add to that analysis. The New York Times has a new analysis of its own of the two approaches from Democrats, from Republicans, as McCarthy vows to conduct his own investigation. It reads, quote, "It's a situation that encapsulates our divided political moment. Whatever the process, the testimony, or the findings, the results of either committee are unlikely to be trusted by voters from the opposing party. And reaching any kind of national consensus about what happened on that awful day feels like as much of a fantasy as any false flag conspiracy theory." Eugene, how much further can the GOP go down this path of alternative facts? We're going to have our own investigation and whitewashing the events of January 6th. Won't that eventually catch up with them?
You know, we've talked about this, you know, ever since they started to kind of whitewash, you know, in February, right? You know, right after they started to go back and kiss the ring of Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And I'm unsure. You know, I think it's concerning because it doesn't seem like the Republican Party has a leadership that's going to stand up and say, no, these things aren't okay. This is not true. You have McCarthy here who on the day called Donald Trump and after that told everyone their conversation, basically telling Trump to call everyone off, to make everyone cool it and for the insurrections to stop. And so now him is saying that he's going to have his own investigation, knowing that that is going to create even more hostility, even more division within the country. They're going forward with that. And so it's one of those things that as we watch Republicans who've made their bed in, you know, 4 years ago, right, when they started to tell us to not to take Donald Trump literally would take him seriously, or whatever the adage was, to not take him and to not take him at his word all the time. And so that's where it's led us. It's led us to a party that's is at the whims of one man and one man's feelings about something that aren't always based in reality or truth.
Juanita, I think part of the reason that we continue to circle around this truth is that for a while there was this sense that there would be a post-Trump Republican Party, that, you know, once he was out of office, they would all come back to earth, they would grapple with reality. As you watch this all play out, how much of the GOP opposition to getting to the bottom of what actually happened is rooted in their strategy for 2022?
100%, Alicia, right? The whole thing that they're balancing here is appeasing Trump, who they have aligned themselves with for their big bet for 2020, and making sure that his base comes with them. So stepping out of line on anything will prompt some type of friction or retraction from Trump, which they can't afford right now. And we know that because look at how they've acted up until this point, obstructing the independent commission that even the Republican caucus helps to negotiate, stripping Liz Cheney of her leadership role. They are going to do whatever it takes to make sure they stay on Trump's good side. And that probably includes Trump ordering them to run a parallel and directly opposing investigation, even though we know it's going to be a sham. We know it's going to be a farce. It's literally a playbook from his reality show days to give his audience something to latch onto and to froth up the mouth over, because he knows how to feed his base, and Republicans in Congress are going to keep peddling to that as much as possible.
You know, Matt, on one hand, we have Republican leaders now fighting vaccine denial, and at the same time, they're running away from the truth about what happened on January 6th. How do you see the interplay between those two stories?
Oh, I think they're completely related. And one thing about Donald Trump, and it's related to this, is Donald Trump recognized what the Republican Party had become long before other Republicans like Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, Chris Christie. This is not a Donald Trump problem. This is a Republican Party problem, which broadly has no interest in the truth. And so we have this, I've said before, I said the greatest pandemic facing America is not coronavirus 19 or whatever, COVID-19. It is the virus of dishonesty and truth. It's infected our democracy. It's infected our health decisions. It's infected completely the Republican Party. And the reason why Donald Trump became the nominee and is most popular is because that's who the Republican Party is.
Juanita, to that point about dishonesty, you heard earlier Representative Banks blaming Speaker Pelosi for security at the Capitol. And I just want to point out that that isn't internally consistent logic, right? If they were just nice tourists who were stopping by, then what does it matter what security was or wasn't? It's absolutely ridiculous. And yet you get the sense that what they are doing is testing the messaging that they're going to be using in 2022, which is like, don't look here, look over there.
Distractions, diversions. That's absolutely right, Alicia. And that's not going to stop. That's going to continue. And it's going to cross a number of issues, whether it's anything related to COVID relief, whether it's related to vaccines. They're going to keep trying to send these mixed signals because they know their base is going to eat it up and not ask any questions. If anything, Democrats need to not fall into the trap of trying to respond to every one of these lies versus sticking to their own message. Because what you're not going to do is something that Matt said earlier. You're not going to be able to convince them anyway. Don't waste your time engaging on it. Stay focused on a message and a vision for this country. That's my message to Democrats going into 2022.
Well, especially because responding to all of those lies would be a full-time job.